Hello everyone, today we're going to discuss empty miles and how far your client should be traveling to pick up a load. Okay guys, so what is empty miles? Empty miles is a distance your client will have to travel from current location to the shipper to pick up a load. Why is it important to us? Well, it is kind of a distance that your client will have to travel for free. You see, when your client is picking up a load, your client will be paid for the distance he or she travels with the cargo from point A to point B. Let's say the distance from the shipper to receiver is 1,000 miles, and freight broker is paying $3,000 for this load, so that means your client is receiving $3 for every mile he or she drives. Now, if your client has to travel 300 miles to the shipper to pick up this load, well, then the total distance is no longer 1,000 miles, it's 1,300 miles. And therefore, average rate that your client will receive will be lower. However, let's put the math aside and discuss what might be an acceptable distance for your client to travel to get the load. In most cases, 50 miles is considered to be a reasonable distance. If you find a load within 50-mile radius from your client's truck current location, then I think it's pretty reasonable for your client to head out toward the shipper, pick up the load, and get going. However, what if you have found a great load which is 200 miles away? Should you book it or not? Well, that depends on the situation. First of all, you want to calculate total amount of miles your client will have to drive. So you have to add this 200 miles to the loaded distance and see if rate still makes sense. So if from financial standpoint it still makes sense, then you might book such load. However, you need to keep in mind that there are risks associated with traveling a long distance. For example, if your client travels only 20 miles to the shipper and then load gets canceled or the product is not ready, well, it's not a big deal. Your client hasn't wasted too much time, hasn't burned too much fuel, probably will get a TONU from the broker, and you can rebook this client on the next load. By the way, if you don't know what TONU is, I'm going to link the video below so you can watch a video about that. Now, imagine that your client travels 200 miles and then load gets canceled. That means your client traveled quite far, lost a lot of time, probably 4 hours or so, and burned quite a bit of fuel. Now, TONU in this case may not really provide enough compensation, and maybe your client will run out of hours and will not have enough time to pick up another load, and entire day goes to waste. Now, that is the risk which you are facing when traveling too far to pick up a load. In my opinion, you should try to stick to loads which are nearby. That is why I'm always advising to keep trucks in the busy area, closer to larger cities, where you're going to have a good selection of freight to choose from. This way you can you don't have to travel too far to pick up a load. However, there might be a situation when your client ends up in the middle of nowhere and there may be no loads in a radius of 100 miles or 200 miles. Well, in this case, you will have to take the chance. You will have to risk it and send your truck far out to pick up a load. There is nothing you can do. It's just part of being in the trucking industry. So in conclusion, let's remember that less empty miles is always better than more empty miles. An acceptable distance to travel is usually 50 miles, maybe up to 100 miles. Anything over 100 miles will be considered to be a pretty long distance to travel to get the load. And even so, the load may be paying great. You need to remember about the risks of something going wrong and your client being stuck or losing an entire day of work. And with all that being said, let's wrap up this video and I will see you next time.